The Stranger, a Dialogue by Walter de la Mare. The midday sunshine is flooding through the French windows of the little parlor, as it is called, and almost as if furtively revealing color by color the pattern of the carpet on the floor. The only occupant of the room is sitting at the piano, her back to the window, a girl in her earlier teens. She is pale, dark-haired, gray-eyed, and at this moment pensive. Her thoughts are far away as she continues slowly ruining the opening bars of "When other lips and other hearts their tales of love shall tell." However clumsy she may be at the moment, she is engrossed. But after yet another heart-rending discord, her hands fall to her lap, and she sits motionless for the few moments before her mother enters the room. She is breathless, but speaks in a low inward voice, rapidly and impulsively. "Where have you been, Sheila? When did you come in? You are nearly 3/4 of an hour late. I have been wandering about everywhere to meet you, and since that poor child. And those wretched motor cars. You are so heedless, so headstrong, in everything." "I'm sorry, Mother, but I hadn't any more pennies to pay the tram fare." "But surely, child, I can't have forgotten giving—" "Yes, but I mean back, Mother." "Back from where?" "I don't see why you should be so cross about it. I was carried on too far." "Too far? What can you mean? In the tram? What were you doing? Learning a lesson? How can you have been so foolish, so absent-minded?" "I'm sorry, Mother. We got right up past Beulah Road before I realized." "Learning a lesson, indeed. Of course not. I shouldn't have mentioned it if I thought you'd make such a fuss about it. I was talking to someone." "Talking to someone? Who? A friend? But didn't she tell you that you had gone beyond the stopping place? What were you talking about?" "It wasn't a she, Mother. It was a man." "A man? Who? What kind of man?" "A stranger, Mother." "Kind of man? Why, our kind of man, of course." "Look, Sheila, have I not told you that it is never advisable to talk to any stranger, and particularly— It doesn't matter a bit, man or woman. What should anyone want to talk to a schoolgirl for?" "I don't see why not to a schoolgirl. After all, I'm not a child. Besides, I didn't talk to him. He talked to me." "I didn't say you were a child. I thought you had better sense. Talk to me. You know that's merely quibbling. What did he talk to you about? What was he like? Have you seen him before?" "Oh, Mother, all those questions. I don't think I've ever seen him before, and yet I don't quite know how to describe the feeling. How can one tell for certain? I may have. He wanted to pay my fare back, but I wouldn't let him." "Of course not. Did he get out, or—" "When I did, yes, I should think he walked about 2 lampposts with me, then he went on the other way." "I asked you what he talked to you about. You say he was a gentleman. How could he, in that case? What was he like?" "As if I didn't know a gentleman by this time. He was dark, very dark, except his eyes. He had blue eyes, and no one could possibly have been nicer, more polite, I mean. And I'm sure you'd agree, Mother, he was very good-looking." "Very good-looking? Good heavens, child, what have good looks to do with it?" "But I didn't say they had, Mother. But it wasn't so much his face as his voice. I remember Daddy once saying that you can tell a person's character better by that than by anything else, whether, I mean, one's telling the truth or not. I don't think he was quite English." "Really, Sheila, you are being purposely provoking, just keeping everything back. Why didn't you say at once he was a foreigner? If only I had gone that way to meet you. It never even occurred to me, though I knew you had left the school, because I telephoned. And what might not have become of you? You might have had a bad accident, been killed, for all I know. Oh, Sheila!" "But even if I had, I don't see why it must have been my fault. Besides, then you might not have heard yet. And he wasn't a foreigner. All I meant is that he didn't speak— Well, just like most people. It was a little like Miss O'Reilly's brother, the gym mistress. There is a pause, and Sheila begins faintly strumming her tune again. Miss O'Reilly? She's Irish, isn't she? Do you mean? Will you please stop strumming that silly sentimental song and turn your face to me? I don't want to be hasty, and I'm not hurt in any way, but you keep on evading my questions. What did this stranger talk to you about? I hope you don't mean that because my back was turned, I was telling lies. I wouldn't tell lies with my back turned anyhow, and you didn't say it was a silly song when we heard it the other day. I saw you listening. Talk to me. The stranger in the tram, I'm sure, for one thing, he wouldn't have at all if he had known this would happen. How silly it all is. A book slipped off my lap, my French book, and he picked it up and smiled at me. He came in immediately after me. He said it was a lovely day. And so it was, Mother. Look at the sun. I saw the first May tree in bloom this morning, and you could hear the birds, the thrushes, even in the tram. I agree, Mother, he did stare rather, but not in a horrid way, and then I thought he wasn't going to say anything more. And, well, I was sorry. But at last he turned back from looking out at the driver and asked me what school I came from. Oh, Sheila, how could you have been so foolish, so unwise? You won't let me go on. Of course I told him the school. Why, the letters are on my hat. And then he asked me if I was going home, and how old I was, and when my birthday was. Perhaps he'll send me a lovely present. Wouldn't that be fun? You'd choose a doll for your little girl. Oh, do be a sport, Mummy dear. Listen, darling, please don't joke and be silly. If you knew, what I know of this world, you'd realize that I had cause for being uneasy, anxious. It's because you are not a child, and so trustful and impulsive, and just follow your heart and not your head. And I don't mean that you shouldn't, but... What did he say then? He looked at me and smiled, and then he asked me where I lived. And you told him? Well, I did wonder a little at that. Then I remembered that, after all, he had only to follow me to find out. Besides, as I keep saying, I knew that he was just being kind, and after that, well, we talked, almost as if we were old friends. He asked me what I should like to do when I left school, and whether I should be able to. He said, "You look very happy. Are you? That was rather queer, wasn't it? Of course I'm happy, generally." Follow you? Kind? Happy? I can't think what girls you can have been mixing with, putting things into your head like that. And now you are turning your back again. I'm dreadfully tired. I must sit down and rest a minute. I was only looking in the glass, Mother. Mummy dear, and you do that yourself, don't you, sometimes? I've watched you. You purse your lips like this, and turn your head first to one side and then to the other, and I think you look adorable. It's just then, if I was a man, I'd fall in love with you, and I suppose you'll think it's only horrid conceit or something if, well, do dark hair and blue-gray eyes like mine often go together? Miss O'Reilly has greenish eyes. Your eyes, Mother, are brown, like pansies, and I adore them. And you know that I wouldn't for the world let the tiniest cloud... There, don't let's say anything more, please. I'm asking you to be serious, Sheila. I don't like this man. He can't have been a gentleman. Did you tell him your name? Surely you must have known. And you confided in him, a perfect stranger, that you were happy, and what have eyes and hair to do with that? Yes, I did. You wouldn't wish me to have told a fib about that, surely. I wanted to ask him his name. That would have been only fair, but I didn't like to. Then he did ask you yours. What did you say? You just go on telling me what he said to me. And he didn't ask me my name either. He guessed it, or saw it on my book. That was the only other curious little thing, because I don't think, now I mean, that at first he wanted to know anything about me, but about another girl. Oh, another girl. Who? Quite at the beginning, he asked me if I had a schoolfellow named Willing. He said he once had an old friend who lived about here who had a daughter. That was his friend's name, and he thought that perhaps... Willing? You're absolutely sure he said willing? Why, of course, and I said what a very curious thing it was that he should have asked me that. Why curious? He smiled at me, and I said it was because that name was once... That name was once... Oh, Mother, how can you be so slow? That it was once your name, and I do think, considering how kind and how nice he was, and interested, almost as if I was grown up, I mean, I don't see why you should judge him or me like that. I wouldn't have dreamed of talking to him because of what you once said, if he had been horrid or nosy or silly, that kind of thing. But he wasn't. I liked him. I hoped then I might see him again. But now, how can I, after what you have said? Why, I wouldn't be as suspicious and standoffish as that, even to the conductor. But there, I suppose I mustn't, in future, say good morning, even to him. Sheila, I want you to be... I can't quite say what I mean, but I want you always to realize that I never tell you what to do or what not to do, unless I think, no, it's for the best. There are dangers, even when everything, ourselves as well as others, and although a supreme and priceless blessing may be... You see, life leads us on, but there is always the past. You can never root out that. Never know when it may not rise up again out of its ashes. I am sure now, from what you have told me, that this stranger hadn't any designs, nothing like that. Still, I want you to promise that, for a few days at any rate, you'll come home another way. It will only mean your being a little later than usual, and the walk will do you good. Gropingly, as if against her will. You say you liked him. Why, his voice, how did he look? Did he say that he might be coming to see you? No, of course not. Coming to see me? Mother, how silly. We just talked of anything and everything else that came into our heads after that. At least I did. After what? After I had told him how odd it was he should have had an old friend living about here called Willing. I mean, that it was your name. And what did he say then? Nothing. Not at first. He looked at me as though he were waiting for me to go on. Then he turned away, and then smiled at me again, as if we were old friends. And that is true, Mother, isn't it? I mean, some people, strangers, you seem to know almost at once, don't you? But I don't think it means past lives, do you? That was what I felt. And Daddy, I'm sure... Daddy? What has Daddy to do with this? I can't imagine what he would say if he knew of it. You must promise me, Sheila, on no account to tell him even a syllable of what you have confided in me. He'd never have a happy moment again if he felt that... You promise? If you ask, of course, Mother. You say he, the stranger, looked well. Did he seem happy, too? Oh, Mother, he looked very well, and I believe if you and I had been together and he'd begun to talk to us, we'd have laughed over it just like two cats. You would have loved it, and then it would have been our little secret. But I wouldn't say he had always been happy. When he had asked about my childhood and the future, he looked almost as if he were homesick. Well, you know what I mean, envious. I don't think, although there was a ring on his finger, that he was married. I don't think so. A little bell sounds. That's luncheon, the second time. You won't say anything to Miss Pierce, Mother, will you? I do wish you hadn't telephoned. No, I promise. He asked, you say, if I was happy. Didn't that strike you as curious? I didn't say so, but he did. Not so very curious. He was telling me about his having been abroad, and how gay and cheerful the people are. And you see, if, at the beginning, I had told you what he'd said last, though you wouldn't give me a chance, you would have seen that there couldn't have been anything silly or wrong in my talking to him. You know how fond I am of Daddy, but I do sometimes find it very hard. Well, to say all that, I mean everything. I think he's always interested, and yet... Well, I'm sure he doesn't understand me, not quite as you do, you dear sweet thing. He, listened, as if even a schoolgirl. "Oh, Mother, do cheer up. I do wish you didn't look so pale and tired and troubled about all this. There isn't the very least need to, and you know I'm sorry." "Yes, but you mustn't, dearest, think like that about your father. He loves you just as I do. But he, the stranger, what did he say last?" "Why, he stayed silent a moment, and then he said, 'Perhaps it would be as well to mention to your mother that we've had this little talk, especially as you have gone on too far with me. She may be anxious about you. Tell her that I have been away from England a long time and shall be leaving again soon. Say what a pleasure it has been to talk to you. To me, Mother. She will understand. Those were his very words, and I suppose I must have looked a little anxious too. Like mother, like daughter, he said, and smiled again. And we stood there under the chestnut tree by Dr. Symonds, and we shook hands and said good-bye, and I don't think he wanted to, not for always. And after a little while I looked back, and he was looking back, and we waved to one another. I am perfectly certain, Mother dear, you'd have liked him immensely. But, well, I don't believe, somehow, that I shall ever see him again." "No?" "No, Mother. Sheila, my precious, precious one, don't look at me like that. You know I would never, never deny you a real friend. Never. It was kind of him to send me such a message. I'm glad now that you were outspoken and your own natural impulsive self. It was only that at first I was a little frightened, alarmed. My precious and precious, all these years. Why are you crying, silly? And so am I. God bless you. I must run upstairs a moment. What will Jessie think of us? I won't be long." She pauses as she opens the door, her slender fingers on the painted china door handle, her lips apart as if she were about to speak again, an ecstatic and passionate expression of tenderness, sorrow, love, transfixing her beautiful face. But she decides against doing so, and goes out.